Welcome to the Ubiquitous Tavern. We are here with Alexei Malakhov, or Alex, and he is not only an avid role player, but also a photographer. So we'll talk a little bit today about photography. You mentioned that you have photographed some cosplayers, so I'm kind of curious to see, what that's like, if that's different than a regular photo shoot, and of course we'll talk RPGs. So before I dive into it, though, where can people find you?
Generally, I'm reasonably active on Facebook. WhatsApp is option as well. I mean, if people want to find me in person, downtown Toronto is where I live in Canada. So there is that, and I'm totally down to face-to-face meetings once the whole plague situation is over.
Yeah, COVID. And I can post a link to your photography website in the description if you'd like.
Absolutely.
As well. So, actually, just let's start off with, how did you get into photography?
Well, it was mid-August of 1990, I believe. My stepfather got me my first camera as a birthday gift. He was an amateur photographer, kind of liked messing around with it, had few friends who were also, into photography, and it just so happened that he tried to get me involved, and it has been 30 years ago, more than that. I still have the thing.
Wow.
A little plastic Soviet-made camera that's as simplistic as they get. So needs a little bit of TLC to work. Some bolts inside are loose, so it's not really functioning. But otherwise, it's in a pristine condition. I've been taking a good care of it. It's been sort of a hobby thing for many years. And it's only been about a decade since I started taking it seriously and got my first, $10 in a coffee for a little thing. And as of almost 7 years, it's my full-time job.
Nice. So you started shifting it from a hobby to an interim job, and it took you about 3 years for that to become your full-time job. What was that transition like?
Pretty much working double jobs, saving every penny into equipment, and just practicing. So, I would have 9 to 5, then I would do a little evening every other day working in a local restaurant in the kitchen, and then all of my weekends are just running around the city with camera, photographing my friends and relatives over and over and over. It's, the way that someone I know put it is, whether you do 3 years of school or 3 years of just practice by yourself, so long as you put same amount of effort into it, you're going to end up with the same skill level and same industry position, which kind of makes sense.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, as long as you are thoughtful about how you practice, right?
Yes.
And kind of
you do need to be your worst critic.
Yeah. So what is it like? I mean, you've transitioned from having a day job to making your hobby and your passion your day job. Do you still feel the same way about photography now that it's your day job?
Yes. The whole reason why I've gotten into it is because I wanted to do it. It just wasn't really profitable before. It did take me a bunch of career changes to find what I'm actually interested in.
Yeah.
It was about finding, this overlap between, your passion, your creative outlet and your paying bills. So, I like a lot of things in life, so I try to find a way to monetize most of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out that the photography one is maybe not the most profitable, oddly enough, of those I tried, but it's the one that makes me enjoy my Monday mornings.
You like the work of it, and because that's a thing that not everyone discovers, right? Like sometimes you turn your hobby into a job and find you actually don't like the nuts and bolts of doing that on a regular basis versus finding a hobby that you like. And I feel like there's always going to be a grind or a little bit of effort somewhere in the job, but the closer you can be to a job that you enjoy every day, the better it is.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So I'm just kind of curious, what was the most profitable?
Well, there was one daytime job I did for Canadian government in the art project, still kind of in the artistic field. That was pretty good. It was a contract job, decent money, nothing to rave about or make me a millionaire, but I lived the way I liked. Another one, I spent some time doing personal training, and when I went freelancing in that area, that's when I've gotten, some pretty decent money because if you are willing to grind and if you're willing to take on multiple clients, it's a pretty decent income. Didn't happen. Injury took me out of that, so I had to start looking for other things, and photography was on the plate already, and I just rolled farther with it.
Yeah, it's nice to have a lot of passions that you can switch between and figure out which is the one that works for you. Um, I think a lot of people have this kind of idea that they ought to have their one thing they're most passionate about, and a lot of times it's just like, well, I have a lot of things I'm passionate about. Let's like play with each one and see how they work for me, right?
Absolutely.
Cool.
Absolutely. I prefer to see humans as very multifaceted beings, and you don't have to have just one passion. You can have one top passion, but you still can like other things in life. Like, I like cooking, but I'm not planning to become a chef. I'm not planning to open my restaurant or anything. I just like cooking for myself and people who are coming over to visit me. It's like a passion, but on a lower scale.
You did work in that too, so you've worked in a lot of different fields. A little bit.
Yes.
You worked there. You worked personal training, worked photography. So you certainly are someone who's well-rounded.
Yeah. My search for self was pretty turbulent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What was turbulent?
My search for self.
Your search for self.
Yeah.
Is turbulent. I don't want to dig into anything too personal, but I have to ask, what was turbulent about it?
Well, tried one thing, spent a couple of years, trying to build the career. Turns out it's not my thing. Jump into another thing, start from square one, and, beginning here, beginning there. Well, the problem being, I'm not getting any younger. So, as I'm growing up in my life, I'm getting, more responsibilities, more bills, more expectations. I'm still in a good health, but it's not like I'm a spry, young 20-year-old chicken anymore. So little by little, it's getting more and more difficult to restart from scratch. So
yeah,
it's like you're trying different things, but every step comes with increasing cost, so to say.
It's true. That's a very serious way of looking at things, but it is kind of true. I spent a long time as an engineer, and then have recently switched tracks and am involved in a couple of different things, including coaching and starting my own business. But yeah, I mean, looking in my late 30s, looking to change careers was a little bit heftier than when I was in my 20s as an English major, just being like, well, why don't I learn to code and start becoming an engineer? So I feel you there. I've seen people make much later career transitions, but you have to make them a little bit more thoughtfully, a little bit more carefully.
Yes, indeed.
All right. Well, I do want to ask you. So you do photography. What is your process? Like, what does a photo shoot look like for you?
Really depends on what exactly we're shooting.
Mm-hmm.
I do everything short of newborns and weddings. And
Is that because you hate babies?
you know, I'm not really a big baby person myself, to be honest.
It seems like they'd be hard to photograph. They don't follow directions very well.
Well, newborns pretty much sleep 20 hours a day if the conditions are good, so it's pretty easy for that. When I look at people, I'm trying to see something, some sort of a character, some elements of personality, some history, maybe something. So it's hard to say. It's like hard to put it in words. But I'm trying to find something special about a person, and I'm trying to work around it. It's hard to do that with newborns because they just don't have much in terms of personality or history yet.
Right.
Now, for example, quite often these days I'm doing product photography, and I have a client that's been hiring me every few weeks. Mm-hmm. They're the company selling bongs. Your regular, bongs for smoking weed because it's now legal in Canada and the business is booming. So with them, it's very simple. I arrive at their warehouse. They have an area allocated for me, and they bring in carts with the products. I bring all the equipment needed. We set up a little, setup, sort of studio setup with lights, suspensions, and everything I need to place the products on, and then it's just a conveyor. Product goes on, 3 pictures are taken, big picture, 2 close-ups, product goes off, product goes on, 3 pictures taken, product off, rinse and repeat for the next 5 hours. But, that's not much to rave about. Every now and then, one of my favorite things to do is to shoot in a studio environment. These days, because of the pandemic, we have no access to rentable studios, so I'm using my living room. There, people come in and I'm spending a bit of time looking at them, how people move, what I can extract from it. We generally have a fundamental idea about what we're doing beforehand, just so that, we know what to prepare, what kind of outfits to bring, but from there on, exactly how it's set up, exactly how it's lit, is often devised right on spot. So sometimes I just put my subject in front of me, grab a seat, and I just sit and stare, and I just wait until my mind wraps itself around what is it that I'm looking at. Then we quickly set it up the way we need it, do enough pictures to make sure we have at least 1 or 2 good ones. Well, if we only needed that much, we're done. If we need more material, then we start working around, things that can be changed.
How do you?
And if I'm doing events,
oh sorry,
no. If I'm doing events, which before the pandemic was my pretty much bread and butter, I am a photojournalist, and my main thing is parties, galas, festivals, awards, all kinds of stuff. All of those are pretty much straightforward. You arrive being prepared, you photograph everything that happens, make sure don't forget all the important people, go home, edit it through the night, done. There is very little fancy about that, but that's literally bread and butter.
Yeah. Well, I was wondering, I mean, it sounds like there's probably, in an event, you look for, not just everything that happens, but there, you try and find moments that are emblematic of the night, or day, or whenever it happens. But I'm kind of curious, when you have someone sit down in your studio and you say, like, you just sit down and stare at them potentially and figure out, what they're looking for. You're looking for their spark. Like, what kinds of things reveal someone's personality to you?
Um, there isn't really one specific thing, but I look a lot about how people feel about themselves. Some people have a lot of this, kind of solid, strong personality. In which case, I'm trying to play around that. Uh, I work with dancers a fair bit, and in this case, you're trying to work around things that showcase, dancing poses, all the jazz, or you're trying to work around kind of concepts that they would get in their dance. Like, if it's somebody who is doing a lot of contemporary work, you're trying to show more edgy kind of look. So, you may want to have some, ripped t-shirts kind of looks, beaten up jeans or whatever. If it's somebody who is specializing in the classical things like a ballet, of course you're going to try to go away from the edgy look and focus more on a, classy, more gentle kind of poses. But a lot of it is about kind of a lot of people through their behavior and how they hold themselves is showcasing their perception of self. So some people are shy. You can work around that. You wouldn't get a, shy person to, do like a bodybuilder show big muscle kind of a thing. You'll work around something a little less unnatural to them. So it's very individual, but I'm looking at how the person moves, how the person sort of behaves, how a person speaks, and just looks like. Sometimes you look at a person, there is a massive, strong jawline. Let's try working around this strong, powerful, chiseled look, and we'll put in, some tighter looking, nice outfit, a very superhero like harsh light to work around that, because that's something that conveys, power in a very stereotypical way. But stereotypes is exactly what, conveys it easily.
Mm-hmm.
So we do that.
Nice. So I kind of wanted to bridge over into the crossover between our mutual interest of RPGs and photography. And you mentioned that you photographed cosplayers, and so I'm kind of curious, what are those shoots like? Are they different than your average shoot, or is it very similar doing a shoot for somebody dressed up as an elf or a warlock or something?
Well, I work with a couple cosplayers. One is very simple. She has just a regular, kind of store-bought outfits, and all we need to do is just to make sure that lighting kind of fits. So, for example, we did a Green Lantern cosplay, and it literally was just one of those, bodysuits with a Green Lantern superhero suit, literally just printed on it. It was simple, it wasn't really anything fancy. So what we did for that is we used a fog machine, created a fog behind her, and we lit it with green. So she's standing there with like a green smoke coming from behind her, and that's all what was needed. Now, though, there is a friend of mine who is a pretty hardcore cosplayer, and his thing is that he's rebuilding an actual perfect replicas of outfits. So if he is doing Witcher, Geralt of Rivia from books, movies, and games, then he literally creates armor piece by piece with all the rivets positioned where they have to be. The swords are 3D printed replicas, so on and so forth. Now with him, when I work with him, he supplies me with artwork that he wants it to replicate. So he sends me posters for the movie, and we're trying to get very close to the poster to show that he's cosplaying not just the character from the movie, but also the familiar look that community already knows. So in
So you're
this
talking
case,
like the competition, the composition, the lighting, the coloring, like all of that. You're kind of matching a
lot of
style
that,
from a poster,
yeah,
for example.
yes, a lot of that has to be done at least close enough for him to be able to put them side by side on his Instagram, and people will see that they're close enough to that. So a complete perfect replica isn't really something that's my strong side, simply because being more of the event photographer, more of a spur of the moment thing, all these precise adjustments, I can do them, but there are people who do it better. Let's be realistic.
Well, it seems like for that kind of thing, you need a lot of props and background if you really wanted to mask everything in a poster or picture.
Yeah. Yeah, we did one shoot with him being a character from a movie, and it's a one of those depressed musicians who smokes a lot, and a lot of promo photos from the movie were done in a narrow street. So we found a back street that was close enough replicating it, and we've done a whole bunch of photographs with him, running down the fire escape, those metal stairs, very New York style, with a guitar case, him sitting just around the place, having a smoke, and we had to highlight the smoke from behind so that it's really popping out there. A lot of interesting challenges like that.
Nice. Well, it seems like you would get to, with cosplaying, experiment with a greater range of lighting and composition and coloring than maybe in just traditional portraiture or event photography.
With traditional, yes, but I like experimenting in studio, and not just studio, but I like having I like having a full control over my environment. So with studio lighting is just easier. So I do like experimenting with these things, and especially sometimes working with dancers. I did the promo for one belly dancer, and for her we need to use a fog machine with a colorful backlighting coming in different colors, so that when she's in her poses with her fancy outfits, it had to be very showtime, kind of bright, powerful, saturated colors. So that was a very similar challenge. When you're talking about event photography, that's totally different story indeed.
Well, the lighting's
because
pretty much out of your control, right?
Yes. Short of situations when I'm working indoors, in which case I just set up my studio lights in corners and strategic spots all over the place, and then the entire space becomes sort of improvised studio, and everybody looks good. And that's one of the reasons people keep on hiring me for event work, is because I can make a regular indoor patio look extremely favorable for people.
Nice. Well, and I had one question. So we were playing a game the other day, and you brought out a full enclosed medieval helmet. I was wondering, where did you pick that up? Is that a prop you've used? Do you cosplay, or where did that come from?
I used to be a big time Larper, and in Russian Larp, it's basically the idea is that you get as close to the reality as possible. So we used to make all of our own outfits, and if your character is supposed to know some sort of sword fighting, you learn sword fighting. If your character in a game is supposed to play an instrument, you learn an instrument. We had people that we did a game in Boston, Massachusetts, that was based on 8th, 9th century Chinese legends, and we had people literally learning whole poems in Chinese to be able to recite them in the proper moment. And I had to go to Boston a few times to practice a stage fight with another character, because the game opens up with our two characters who are rivals, and both of them are martial art masters. I used to do a bit of martial arts when I was much younger at the time. So we gathered and we actually choreographed a fight with weapons, losing weapons, hand-to-hand combat, jumps and shoulder rolls and what have you not. It was short. It was like 30 seconds, but in 30 seconds you can do an awful lot
Oh yeah.
of big, big, flashy fighting. So we had to go that far. As a part of this, I got basic training in some two-hand sword fighting, one-handed, sword and a shield, a bit of axe. And at the tail end of our little community, everybody grew up, got jobs out of city, gone.
Yeah.
But at the tail end of it, some of our members started experimenting with actual metal plate defense. And there was a little, I don't want to call it a tournament, but a little kind of competition we've had. And I ended up coming tie for the first place with one of my instructors. And, in a congratulatory way, I received that helmet to be mine. And
Nice.
it still has a few dents on it because I actually wore it during the actual competition. It's just that at the end of it, the guy said, "You know what? Might as well keep it. It's good for you." And I kept it. It's pretty much my last piece of the equipment from those days. Oh, and I have a cloak, a cape that I made as well. It's nice and warm. I wear it on the balcony when it's too cold outside.
Nice. You made it by hand?
Well, the stitching was done on a sewing machine.
But yeah.
But short of that, yes, it's hand.
Awesome.
It's very simple. Like the designs for simple cloaks are not hard at all.
Well, I mean, between cooking and photography and personal training and medieval combat and sewing, that's a lot of things to learn in a life. And guitar, there you go, many skills.
Well, I don't call it having a skill in guitar. I've been messing around with music here and there, always been my passion, but it's my social art.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't really socialize these days, so this is like the whole thing is on the back burner a big time.
Yeah.
But one day.
One day things will open up again. Well, that's a lot of dedication to put into RPGs. That type of LARPing is, from how you describe it, is parts of it are very much actually like putting on a play, right? Like the stage combat or the.
It is, yeah. The way I often describe it to people is that it's basically a full-blown theater play without viewers.
Mm-hmm.
Each one is an actor, and people around you are your viewers. It's also one of our ideas behind it was always that by being involved in these games, in this place, you're gaining some sort of experience that you would not be able to gain in a modern world otherwise. So, for example, how often do we get a chance to choose between lives of two of our close friends? In real life, probably never, God forbid, ever. But in the game, the possibility of that happening is actually pretty realistic, right? Because all the games are these big epic stories. So you're ending up with given an opportunity to get in a situation and make a decision, that would give you some sort of a life experience that you would never have living in downtown Toronto. So I see that as a way to sort of enrich self. It's an additional layer of life experience to me. It's a way to take your personality and put it to a test. And that teaches some life lessons, if you ask me.
Sure. Well, I mean, that general idea holds true for general tabletop role-playing game where you're imagining it, but there's a added dimension of realism to the experience when everybody is dressed, everybody is speaking in part, everyone's done these preparations outside to have skills that a character would have, and so that is a pretty intense level of dedication. I was kind of wondering. I have never LARPed myself. I've done dance and other performance type things, so I can kind of understand the attraction to performance. But I'm kind of curious, how did you get into LARPing? Were you a role player before then? And
Basically, I came to Canada, and in just a couple of months after, I made a couple of Russian friends here who were living in my building. Because as an immigrant, I had no English command, I had no connections, nothing. I heard a few people talking Russian in the elevator, I jumped it. Long story short, somebody knew someone, that someone knew someone else. There was a little bit of Russian downtown Toronto, like a teenage, like, late teens, early 20s group. And at one point, we went to grab some food at a local place. And there was this new guy that was there, and we were talking, and we started for some reason talking about some martial arts and old school like martial art weaponry, because like a couple of years before coming to Canada, I started getting some interest in some martial arts, and all these like young like late teen guys, all these kung fu movies 20 years ago. That was the whole rage. So I was looking for more information about it, and the guy I was talking to turned out to know an awful lot about combat weaponry of past. So I started chatting with him, we exchanged contacts, went out for drinks a couple of times, and he was a big time LARPer and role player, tabletops and everything. He ended up being my good friend for many, many years, and he's been the one who's been teaching me a lot about sword fighting, and he also was the one who used to set up LARPing games. And I just kind of got under his wing, and he ended up actually being pretty much an eternal player in all of my tabletop games. And he's been a creator of a lot of LARP games that I was into. So we were kind of, pretty tight. We're not in touch these days, 20 years later, but that's how it happened.
Nice.
And interestingly enough, because I always liked cameras, while it was still a hobby, I was actually the guy running around with a camera and taking all the pictures of all of our gatherings and trainings and games. So even before it was any sort of, prospect of job, let alone actual employment, I just liked that I can push the button and stop time.
Yeah.
That was awesome. That was magic.
Yeah, well, I think that goes back to finding your passion, finding the thing that always holds that magic for you. I did have a question. So when you got introduced to this friend who introduced you to LARP, was that your first time playing tabletop role-playing games?
Yes. Yeah, that was the very beginning of everything. And it was 19 and a half years ago.
Wow. I mean, I think you've highlighted one of the things I like about the tabletop community generally. LARPer and just general tabletop, game playing. If people want to put a little extra effort into their recreation to do something creative like tabletop role-playing games, I feel like there's a higher percentage of people who do very creative things, whether they're cosplayers and they have the sewing piece, LARPers and the performance piece. Sometimes people, writers who write backstory or poetry in there, map makers, just all sorts of very random skills that you might have or employ and bring to the game with you. And it's just really fun to be around people who are that creative. A strong fan base is people who do art and character art and things like that. So, there's a lot of arts that are kind of peripheral to LARPing and tabletop role-playing. So you get a very creative crowd there.
Yes. As a matter of fact, when I'm doing my face-to-face tabletop games, I'm going as far as trying to make all of my snacks relevant to the universe I'm doing my games in.
Nice. No Doritos.
So, for example, nope. Unless we're doing modern.
Yeah.
When I'm doing fantasy games, which is kind of my specialty, I used to do a lot of cyberpunk, But I kind of don't feel like writing cyberpunk these days for some reason. It's kind of, I think it was a phase or something. But these days it's all classical, mid-range fantasy, like D&D stuff. And, for example, I do things like I make beef jerky at home. I make my own custom-made jerky, and it's just like a big wooden bowl with jerky sitting there. What's more medieval than that? I'd buy a big order of chicken wings from a local eatery, and, what's more, fantasy-like than just a regular bird,
Or get a loaf of bread from the store, leave it out for a few days till it gets nice and hard. Russian cereals.
Yeah. Or, I would go and buy a nice loaf of bread from a bakery. I even went as far as buying a few bottles of food coloring, and I just take regular club soda. I pour it into fancy liquor bottles that I take stickers off. Nice. So they're all kinds of fancy bottles. And I just put a drop of food coloring in it. So I have red healing potion bottle, blue mana potion bottle, and green poison bottle. And the food coloring doesn't change the flavor, but it's just a regular club soda. It's literally just, water with CO2 in it. But with a little bit of that, it creates this, atmosphere. And I like atmosphere, I set up soundtracks. I have a tablet with a complete set of soundtracks on Spotify. So I just, as the game progresses through different situations, I kick in different tunes, so that people can be more involved in this. So
nice. That's a lot of ambience.
Little by little, yeah.
I one of my most memorable games was similar in the sense of I had the GM running the game who would play club. It was a modern one. It was World of Darkness, where he'd play club music in the background or whatever if we're downtown. Or at one point, when the lights went out in the story, he kind of slowly edged closer to the light switch so that he could just shut off the lights in the room at exactly the same time. And it was very effective. It really put you in the game. Like you said, it made it more of a life experience and less just something you're imagining.
Yes. I like it being a little less of, playing your average video game while half watching a TV show in the background, and more of being in it. It's more like, how we keep on developing these technologies, 3D movies so that we can see the depth. Now, on top of that, we have chairs that shake and move around to follow the movie. Now, the next thing is we have fans blowing air so that we can feel the movement within. Next thing is they're developing technology to include smells. The sound surround systems so that the sound is moving in accordance with the action on the screen. So, adding extra elements to it, like dressing up. I have a few costumes from my old Larping time. Half of them don't fit me anymore, but we're wearing those. And, everybody feels like they're a little more invested, a little more involved. I have my own Dungeon Master's costume, which is pretty much regular black pants, a short, kind of like a Victorian-ish kind of simple shirt, this cross string, slightly puffy sleeves, that cliche commoner kind of white shirt, and I have a leather vest, similar to what I'm wearing, except for it's brown leather, really worn out. I'm wearing that, I look just like any average fantasy character. You know? I can be a bartender, I can be a merchant, I can be anything. It just kind of looks the part. Despite all of my LARPing and everything, can I role play an awful lot? Yes. During games, like my style has always been a little more of a, mainly because I used to play a lot with very imaginative people. My style has always been I give you just enough information, and your imagination builds it into whatever you want to be. So sometimes I don't even have pre-made lines for characters, but I'm saying, okay, the guy agrees with you and takes you down the corridor. That's enough, and people's imagination kicks in for there. So I don't need to do any sort of, big role playing. Har, har, har.
Yeah, well, if you have the ambiance,
get off my lawn.
Nice, all the voices. I don't want to take up too much. Oh, sorry.
No.
All right. I don't want to take up too much of your time. Some of our technical setup ate into that. But I did want to ask you one last question before we sign off, which is, what is your favorite role-playing game to play? What's your favorite system?
I can't say that I have any particular preference. Tonight, I'm going to do the first round of Fate Core. And I want to see how that plays. It seems to be very elegant to me, and I like it. Back in the days, I used to do a lot of D&D 3.5, and then for many years I did Fusion. I like Fusion for insane flexibility, so there was that. In terms of my favorite game, to be honest, I ended up being an eternal DM. Because I would always easily and quickly crank out simple storylines, and people could call me like 2 hours in advance, and by the time they arrive, I already have, the whole little adventure written out. So there was that. In terms, I do have some favorite stories from the games I ran. In terms of the system, I've had a bit of experience with groups, and it's a little too crunchy for me.
Yeah.
I'm looking for something moderate crunch. I don't know how Fate will work for me too well, because it's a little too broad and amorphous, which is the beauty of it, of course. So I'll see how it actually behaves. But I've researched a little bit, and it does look to me like that Savage Worlds might be the one that's very much down my alley, or Cortex Prime. I am yet to play those both, but it looks like those systems are perfect balance for me.
Yeah, I've read Savage Worlds. I haven't played it. It's on my to-play list. I've played Fate. It is a little bit lighter and more narrative in terms of design. I know exactly what you mean by GURPS. I have played it. I have enjoyed it, but it can take like 4 hours to craft the right character, looking through all of those little character quirks. I think Fantasy Age was an interesting one in terms of a lighter version of Dungeons and Dragons, if you specifically like fantasy, and then there's Dungeon World on an even lighter level. But it sounds like one of the things you look for is you do look for some complexity and strategy in the game, not strictly narrative, but also it does sound like you put a premium on not only the ambiance but the story, and the story is what makes a role-playing game more so than the system.
Yes. For me, I don't want system to get in the way of a story. And for example, today I'm doing session 0 for a couple of players in Fate, and tomorrow we're running an actual game. And I don't want the system to get in the way, because I want people to go through this whole semi-convoluted story. Basically, the story revolves around an owner of an alchemy shop, and a preacher traveling girl suddenly learning that there is a cult in the city which plans to release a massive plague, because once enough population is diseased, they can open a portal to summon a big time demon of disease who they worship, so that the hell can start taking over the human plane. So it's a pretty big endeavor, and basically I want them to not be stuck with a lot of fighting, but there will be some fighting. I want them to resolve fighting real quick and move on to further investigation onto what's going on. Why is there poisoning? How come that someone just purchased every single healing potion in their shop? Like, what's the deal with all of that? I want them to go through more investigative steps.
Mm-hmm.
In systems, crunchy systems like Fusion, for example, combat may take a little longer. In Fate, I anticipate combat to be like 10-15 minutes and be done. At least the way I'm planning to narrate it. So, my intention is to get more through, deeper into this little conspiracy, and find out who stands behind it all, and try to stop the demon invasion. We'll see how that goes.
Nice. Yeah, it sounds fun. I think a good game for me also involves kind of a nice balance of role play, investigation and problem solving, and combat. You have a few of those things. The combat used to for high risks, high stakes situations to level things up. But then I find my attention wandering if you have some of the D&D style games where it's just 4 hours of tactical combat.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot against tactical combat. I have over 200 D&D miniatures.
Mm-hmm.
I have a whole graphed tablet, dry erase markers, everything. But not all games require that.
Yeah.
I do plan to have an ongoing campaign, which is basically just a whole bunch of one-offs of Monster Hunter team. And,
wow.
It's more like less monster hunting and more like monster exterminators.
Mm-hmm.
Like pest exterminators. So I want to get something like this going on, in which case there's going to be an awful lot of crunchy combat.
Yeah.
Then, by all means. But a lot of my games, I like stories where everybody has hidden agenda. That's my thing.
Yeah, that's fun. As long as people work together enough to keep the plot moving, the intrigue between characters and the NPCs and within the group is really fun. Some of my favorite moments, especially as a GM, are watching players who really ran with their characters' personalities and kind of play it off of each other.
I did have a very interesting game back many years ago. It was a cyberpunk, this kind of dystopian future, very William Gibson kind of thing. It's a trio of the trio is a technical guy who runs a car shop, a retired sniper from corporate security force, and a Russian hacker guy. Very cyberpunk.
Yeah.
So those three guys, they had a little sort of a job, like little gigs and everything, but it was not enough for them to live the life they want. So what they were doing some, kind of like underground criminal work, where basically they had this whole, think about darknet Craigslist system, where you can hire freelance criminals to do little jobs for you, where you don't want your criminal people to leave too many traces back to you. So basically they were picking up assignments like this and getting a decent cash on that. But thing is, because you're a freelancer, there is no criminal syndicate backing you up if you're in shit. That was very fun. And there was one story where they needed to exterminate a guy who got caught by cops because he knows way too much and he is gonna crack an investigation. So their sniper was had this perk, sense of duty. If he said he'll do something, it must be done. Cannot be any other way. He's a big time, uptight military kind of guy, like super duty, super, lawful, kind of like lawful evil kind of thing, like, And their hacker was the worst prankster in existence. Also an absolute asshole. Great team member, like great professional, terrible team member. So the idea was what they planned to do is they needed to get and kill the guy while he is in jail. But you can't really get into the jail. There are cops everywhere. So what they did is they got a rifle, one of those, these humongous sniping rifles with the bullets that are like this big that can shoot through a brick wall. Their plan was they created a fake law firm, completely legitimate looking website and everything, and they sent one of their guys to pretend to be a lawyer to talk to this guy they need to exterminate. And he was supposed to give the guy a pack of cigarettes. The cigarettes are laced with radioactive material so that they can see him through the wall with X-ray goggles. And then the sniper knows where exactly the guy is and shoots him. Simple task, right? Well, the sniper gets a position. He is having a clear view of the building. It's a rainy day. He suffers. He doesn't like rain. But sense of duty. He promised to kill the guy. That's it. Well, their hacker guy throws out a pack of cigarettes laced with radioactive material, takes another pack of cigarettes, and laces it with psychotic drugs. Gives it to the guy, while talking to him, pretending to be his lawyer, talking to him about how terrible his case is, and oh my god, stresses out this guy. This poor criminal smokes half a pack of cigarettes, gets sent to his cell, and has a massive psychotic fit. Starts attacking other cellmates, and they kill him right there. Well, the whole thing is, they kill the guy. But it was not done by the sniper who gave his word that he will pull the trigger. And that, it's done, but not the promised way. But it's done, but the sense of duty. That created such a insane turmoil in a poor, lawful, evil kind of this military soldier guy. It took him few sessions to get himself back together because he had issues with aiming and everything, and every time he's in the room with a hacker, he wants to fucking choke him. Phenomenal game. Absolutely phenomenal.
Nice. Yeah. That's exactly right. And I like in that scene that you detail, I've had players who fight enough that they don't even pursue the plot. You're like, all right, well, I guess I'll try and the plot is now the fight between you guys, so we'll see how this shapes out. This has gone from cooperative, and it's still kind of cooperative. The player kind of threaded that line well, where they got, like you said, they got the job done, but he did it in a way that completely messed with his teammate, which that's interesting. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty powerful.
It was a very interesting thing because it's kind of like it was set to create a psychological difficulty, and it was not even my idea. I thought it will be a little simple quest for them, and then I have a bigger quest kind of trailing off it. But they took an entire session to do just that one thing, and holy hell, everything broke loose. Nobody left unscarred after that session, and that wasn't even their worst.
Nice.
But so that was a very, very interesting series of games with these guys.
All right, well, thanks for sharing. I'm going to sign off now. This is Alex. I'll give you the link to his photography website in the description. You can also find both of us on the Ubiquitous Tavern server, where we run one-shot RPGs every other Friday night, so it's a great place to drop in. If you are new to role-playing, you can have some people walk you through it. It's a great place to pick it up without like the commitment of a long campaign, just to try it out. It's great for perennial DMs who can be players for once. For example, Alex I've been able to play with him, which is fun, as well as running some games myself. And we also do feature some independent game developers. So, and interviewed Kevin of D20 Go last time, for example. He's tested his content. That was actually the campaign that Alex and I played together. And so it's a fun place for game developers too to come test their content. So please visit Ubiquitous Tavern, visit Alex at his site, and thank you for watching.
Thank you for having me.